Millionaire single dad sees milk-selling girl save his child who can't hear or speak. What he does next change. The early morning mist still clung to the sidewalks of New Haven as people bustled past, clutching their coffee cups and briefcases, barely noticing the barefoot girl standing at the street corner. She was no older than 12, her tattered dress fluttering in the breeze as she balanced a crate of glass milk bottles with both hands. Her name was Neela. Every morning before school, she sold milk from the local farm to help her ailing mother and baby brother survive one more week. 2 blocks away, in a sleek, glass-walled penthouse that overlooked the city, Ethan Langley sipped his espresso while trying to get his 7-year-old son, Mason, ready for school. Ethan was a self-made millionaire, a tech CEO whose name appeared often in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. But behind the luxury and accolades, his life was far from perfect. Mason had been born deaf and mute. Ethan's wife, unable to cope, had left when Mason was just a toddler. Since then, Ethan had poured his heart into his son, but he often felt helpless, always afraid he wasn't doing enough. Mason communicated through sign language and an app on his tablet, but his world was quiet, and often lonely. Ethan did everything to protect him. Too much, some might say. That morning, in the chaos of juggling a work call and packing Mason's bag, Ethan made a rare mistake. He looked away for just 1 minute while they waited outside the apartment building for the car, and Mason, curious about a butterfly, wandered off. The child followed the fluttering wings across the street, unseen by the thick crowd. He didn't hear the honking of an oncoming van or the screams of panicked bystanders. But Neela saw him. She had just sold her last bottle and was heading home when her eyes locked onto the little boy stepping into the street. Without thinking, without a single hesitation, she dropped her crate and sprinted. In one fluid motion, she yanked Mason back onto the sidewalk just as the van screeched past, missing him by inches. People gasped. Some applauded. But Neela didn't wait for thanks. She crouched in front of the boy, noticing his blank expression, the way he didn't respond to the noise around him. She slowly moved her hands in a few basic signs, "Are you okay?" and to her surprise, Mason's eyes lit up. He nodded. Ethan came rushing seconds later, panic written all over his face. When he saw his son safe and the girl standing beside him, his knees almost buckled in relief. He hugged Mason tightly, then turned to Neela. You saved his life," he said breathlessly. "How did you know he couldn't hear?" Neela shrugged. "My brother's the same. Deaf and mute. I recognized the signs." Ethan stared at her. She was young, dirt-smudged, and clearly poor. But there was a depth in her eyes that shook him. A kind of wisdom and courage far beyond her years. He tried to hand her money. She shook her head. "No, sir. I didn't do it for that." "Then let me give you something else," he said, more insistently. "Anything." Neela hesitated, then looked down at her shoes, or rather, the holes in them. "Can you help my brother? He's 5. We can't afford a school that knows how to teach him." That evening, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about her. About how a child from the streets had noticed what no adult had, and acted faster than most professionals would. He thought about how she signed so naturally, instinctively, without pity or awkwardness. The next day, Ethan did more than send help. He went with Mason to find her home. They walked through a narrow alley, stepping over puddles and discarded crates, until they reached a small shack at the end of the lane. Neela was outside, spoon-feeding her brother, who clung to her like a lifeline. Their mother lay inside on a thin mattress, coughing weakly. Ethan knelt beside the children. "Your name's Neela, right?" She nodded. "Well, Neela," he said softly, "I have a proposal. I want you and your brother to join a special school for children like Mason. I'll pay for everything, tuition, supplies, even housing if needed." Her eyes widened. "But why?" "Because you gave my son something I couldn't," Ethan said, his voice thick. "You understood him. You made him feel seen. You reminded me that empathy doesn't come from privilege, it comes from the heart. At first, Neela resisted. She didn't want to leave her mother. But Ethan, moved by the bond between them, arranged medical care for her mom, a small apartment nearby, and a scholarship not just for Neela's brother, but for Neela too. Weeks passed. Mason began smiling more, laughing even, in his own silent way. With Neela around, he became braver, more willing to play, to explore, to trust the world. Ethan watched as his son transformed. And he watched Neela bloom too. From a milk-selling girl in worn clothes to a bright, articulate student with a future. Then came the day that stunned even Ethan. It was Mason's birthday, and the school had organized a performance. Each child was to share a message, spoken, signed, or through art. Mason stood on stage nervously, holding Neela's hand. Then, slowly, he raised his fingers and signed a single sentence they had practiced for weeks: "Thank you for finding me." The room went silent. Then, someone began to clap. Soon, the whole hall erupted in applause. Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat, tears threatening to spill. He looked at Neela, who simply smiled and signed back to Mason, "I see you." That night, Ethan tucked his son into bed and sat alone in the living room. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone in his parenting. He didn't feel powerless. He felt guided by a little girl with broken shoes and a boundless heart. So he made a decision. He created a foundation in her name, the Neela Project, to support deaf and mute children from underserved communities. And he made Neela its first youth ambassador. She traveled, spoke through signs and interpreters, and told her story not with bitterness, but with hope. Years later, that milk-selling girl became a speech therapist, building bridges for children who felt invisible. Mason. He grew into a confident teen who, despite his silence, had the loudest heart in any room. And Ethan? He stopped seeing himself as a man who had everything but couldn't fix what mattered. Because he had learned that sometimes, it's not money or success that changes lives, it's a simple act of courage from someone the world almost didn't notice. And in doing something for someone else, he had finally healed himself. Because when you help a child find their voice, even in silence, you help them find their place in the world. And that changes everything.